I was 8 years old when Elvis died, and at the time, despite my age, I understood who he was and his status in the world of entertainment. I had heard his songs, I had seen him on TV. I knew who he was. It would be years before I realized what he was, however. After his death, my parents bought a collector's set of Elvis records, and one of them caught my imagination and spent far more time on my little turntable than the rest of them. Elvis in Hollywood. What the hell is this? I must have wondered. Elvis made movies? Not just songs, but movies? Yeah. And he really churned them out, too. Over 30 films in less than 15 years. And when you take into account the time he lost in the army, that's an incredible rate. And just as dominant as Elvis has been on the music charts in the 50s, he was just as formidable as a box office draw in the 60s. And then he was a massive concert tour draw in the 70s. Whatever he did, he sort of became the best at. And years later, this perspective in my mind, when I wrote a play about the early years of American rock and roll, I described Elvis as a meteor that struck the earth, changing everything, seismically, like leaving nothing the same in its wake. Like the cataclysm that ended the reign of the dinosaurs, the meteor that Elvis represented changed society and put it on the fast track to what we know today. There will never be a star like Elvis again. There can't be, because the world isn't like what it was when Elvis arrived. John Lennon said, "Before Elvis, there was nothing." And so by association, now there is everything. That's a lot of credit to anyone, but the mighty shoulders of the king can bear it. Sadly, in the decades since his death, the unimaginable has happened. First, it became, somewhere along the way, fashionable to joke about Elvis. About his weight, about his drug addiction, about his grandiosity, about his terrible movies. And worse than that, generations of children who don't really know who he was and cannot grasp the massive scope of his contributions to the world of music and celebrity culture. We have his music. We have his films. We have the perfect document from beginning to end. I'm an Elvis fan. I always have been. I teach my music students Scotty Moore guitar licks, my media literacy students about Elvis appearances on television in the 1950s, and yeah, man, I've been to Graceland. Elvis wanted to be a great actor, but we didn't get that from him. As his manager and directors and fans ultimately wanted a movie star. And great stars and great actors aren't always the same thing. And you can see that sort of thing all the time, both in the films of today and when you watch and when you love old movies.
Hello, film historians. I'm Sam, and I love old movies. We've got Derek the Dad Kick here.
Hello, and welcome to episode 28.
More like episode 20 great.
Okay, yeah, that's the stuff. Right there.
I can't believe I just did that.
And this is the episode in our all-romance movie February, where for the second time we will be looking at a film starring the husky-voiced film siren of yesteryear, Lizabeth Scott, who was...
Wait.
What?
Wait.
What?
This isn't a Lizabeth Scott movie.
It literally is.
She might be in it, but it's hardly her movie. Because this film is the second film starring the legendary Elvis Presley. And Elvis movies are Elvis movies, and no one else's. That's the way it is.
Okay, that sounds like an immutable law.
It is. It's probably in a physics textbook somewhere. Some sort of natural law of the galaxy.
What is Elvis's is Elvis's?
All hail the king, baby.
Okay, well, I'm not going to argue with that.
Today we are taking a look at Loving You from 1956, which does have Lizabeth Scott in what was kind of her last feature film role. Not that long after Too Late for Tears in the grand scheme of things.
To hear all about Lizabeth Scott, go check out episode 2 where we talk all about her, and the film Too Late for Tears. Let's just say that once she wasn't Hal Walsh's mistress anymore, her career wasn't exactly on the old upswing by this point.
More on that later. For now, let's do business and then get on with things.
You bet. Well, first off, a big thank you to our listeners. You guys are literally the gas in our tank. You're digging our little niche podcast, and that's very cool for us. We love making it, and knowing you're out there listening is very nifty.
So please take a moment to hit like, subscribe, and share.
Oh, yeah.
If you are on YouTube. Or give us a stars or a rating if you are listening on a platform that has that.
Hey, even just text someone you know and say, oh, hey, check out this show.
They might like it as much as you do.
You never know.
And be sure to give us a follow on the socials.
Ah, the socials.
It's a great way to socialize.
Hence the name. Let's tell them how.
You can find us on the Facebook.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
Or the Instagram.
At I Love Old Movies, the podcast.
On El Twitter.
At ILOM podcast.
Or send us a good old-fashioned email.
I Love Old Movies, the podcast at gmail.com.
All one word.
Yep.
And next Monday is Family Day here in Ontario.
Long weekend, kid.
And that means that the I Love Old Movies podcast will be debuting on Pet Rock Radio.
Yeah.
They'll be running our episodes in order, starting with Rope of Sand and moving forward from there. And it will air 3 times a week.
And Monday, we're talking the 21st, mind you, will be the day that Pet Rock Radio announces the nominations for the 2022 New Music Awards. And those nominations will be presented by Sam and I.
I love that.
So go check out Pet Rock Radio. Don't even wait until the 21st. Do it now. We'll link them in the comments.
Okay, the 30th episode. We have a change of plans to announce.
We kind of do, yeah. We're pushing our deep dive on the HUAC back a little bit. That might be more an episode 40 thing.
So for episode 30, we're going to do something a bit different.
We are going to watch a film and record our thoughts and commentary as the film plays. And we will provide links to the film. It will probably be something you can view on YouTube so that you can watch the movie and listen to our commentary at the same time.
We promise not to eat snacks into our microphones.
Not loudly, anyway.
So keep an eye out for that. Episode 30, coming up on March 4th.
But now it's time to check out some Elvis.
Oh yeah.
Hit it!
Known far more as a writer than a director, Hal Cantor got his start as a comedy writer, working on projects by the likes of Eddie Cantor, Ed Wynn, Martin and Lewis, and Bob Hope. His directorial career was not vast, with only 11 credits, most being in television. Loving You was his first directing gig, and was followed by 2 more films in 1958, I Married a Woman with Rowan and Martin, and Once Upon a Horse with Diana Dors. So, not exactly hard-hitting fare. He worked sporadically as a television director after that, working on programs such as The Milton Berle Show, Julia, and The Jimmy Stewart Show. His final directing credit was the TV movie For the Love of It in 1980. As a writer, Cantor was always busy, providing scripts to a number of TV shows, TV specials, TV movies, and even some features. Interestingly, Loving You wasn't his only Elvis project, as he also wrote the script for Blue Hawaii. But the 1960s and into the 2000s, Cantor was credited as a writer for many of the annual Academy Awards ceremonies. Hal Cantor died in 2011 at the age of 92.
Although Hal Cantor received a writing credit on Loving You, so did scriptwriter and composer Herbert Baker. Baker wrote for films and television, as well as Broadway scores. Primarily associated with comedy and very light fare, Baker's first screenplay was the film So This Is New York in 1948. After that, it was a smattering of small films and television shows, like a Francis the Talking Mule movie and an episode of The Dinah Shore Show, before Baker wrote the screenplay for the music comedy The Girl Can't Help It, and then Loving You the next year. Baker also wrote the screenplay for the excellent Elvis film King Creole, which was directed by Michael Curtiz.
The Casablanca guy?
Yeah.
The Casablanca guy directed an Elvis film?
He did, and it's good.
Huh.
Baker ended the 60s writing 2 of the Dean Martin Matt Helm films, Murderer's Row and The Ambushers. For most of the 60s and 70s, it was all television writing mostly, and his writing career ended with a John Denver and the Muppets Christmas special in 1979 and the awful Neil Diamond version of The Jazz Singer in 1980. Baker won 2 Primetime Emmys for his writing, one in 1959 for An Evening with Fred Astaire, and one in 1971 for Flip. Baker died in 1983 at the age of 62.
Full disclaimer here. We will not even attempt to discuss Elvis Presley, the music star, or celebrity here. Truly, he is too monumental a figure to try to put into perspective in the time we have. But we can definitely talk about Elvis the movie star. And for all the grief and criticisms he took over his films and his acting, there's a significant body of work and some considerable success to discuss. After Heartbreak Hotel hit number 1 in 1956, Elvis's movie career took off, with him appearing in 4 films in the next 2 years. Each film was a financial hit, and Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had already learned the tricks of playing studios against each other to maximize Elvis's paychecks. Elvis's stated desire was to be a good motion picture actor, and following in the footsteps of performers like Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra, perhaps he had the right mindset. Certainly his acting in films like Loving You and King Creole showed his potential. But after Elvis returned from the army in 1960, his films became formulaic and repetitive. Musical comedies featuring starry-eyed girls, speedy cars, and exotic locales defined the films creatively, all while expenses were cut in order to make the films more cheaply, while paying Elvis more and more. For his part, as the films became endlessly repetitive, Elvis checked out, seeing the films as a chore and not a creative endeavor. His aspirations to be a good actor blunted by the endless typecasting in increasingly bad films. Parker had no faith in Elvis's talents as an actor and thought he had no potential, so saw no point in challenging him with better roles. And frequent producer Hal Wallace was adamant that Elvis sing in his movies, fearing no one would want to see him otherwise.
But even the music couldn't save his films. By the mid-1960s, with bands like the Beatles and the Beach Boys redefining contemporary rock and roll, Elvis's movie music became increasingly trite and weak, songs that he didn't even want to sing.
Elvis made a lot of films, 33 in all, from 1956 to 1971, and in that time, he was legitimately one of the top box office draws in Hollywood. And the co-stars he worked with were many and notable. Names like Richard Egan, Anne Margaret, Harry Morgan, Charles Bronson, Walter Matthau, Barbara Eden, Elsa Lanchester, Angela Lansbury, Kurt Russell, and Mary Tyler Moore shared the screen with Elvis. His most successful film was Love Me Tender, which, ironically, is the only film on his career that he was not the star of, but it was his first film, and the desire to see him on screen was strong. In fact, Elvis's top 3 grossing films were the first 3 he ever made, with Loving You and Jailhouse Rock rounding out the top 3.
An interesting coda to his film career came late in his life. Elvis was apparently offered the role of John Norman Howard in A Star Is Born. Barbra Streisand wanted Elvis to play the role and personally recruited him, but Tom Parker shot the idea down over billing, money, and the fact that Streisand had gone to Elvis directly and not to him first. Elvis wanted to do the film, but it never happened. Chris Christopherson played the role and killed it, but the idea of Elvis, at that point in his life, playing that character in that film, he might finally have been seen as the actor that he always wanted to be. Truly, this is one of Hollywood's biggest what-ifs.
Elvis Presley died in 1977 at the age of 42.
Playing the role of bandleader Tex Warner is Wendell Corey. Corey enjoyed a 21-year career in Hollywood, mostly featuring in films you've never heard of. Coming off a few Broadway productions in the early 40s, Corey was discovered and signed to a contract with Paramount by Hal Wallace, and this led to him appearing in a string of films quickly. His film career began in 1947 with Desert Fury and ended in 1968 with The Star Maker, with Corey firmly established as a B-movie staple, who always found work and once in a while turned up in something a bit more notable. Corey appeared in I Walk Alone, a movie we've talked about before on this show. It's a good film noir that stars Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, and Lizabeth Scott. He also appeared in the Alfred Hitchcock classic Rear Window and the Burt Lancaster western The Rainmaker, as well as Loving You. But aside from those, it's a very full resume of lesser-known films and scattered television appearances. Corey was also deeply involved in his political interests. He was an elected member of the board of directors for the Screen Actors Guild and was even the president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences from 1961 to 1963. He was elected to the city council in Santa Monica, California in 1965 and had inspirations to run for Congress, but he fell short there, losing the primary in 1966, before passing away in 1968 at the age of 54.
With his music already taking America and the world by storm, Elvis Presley and Colonel Tom Parker were interested in pursuing opportunities to act in Hollywood films. Elvis was very into the idea of being an actor, and Colonel Tom was quite interested in exploiting Elvis's celebrity status any way he could. Not believing that rock and roll music had any staying power, Parker wanted to ensure that the Elvis money-making machine continued in high production after the rock fad faded away.
Elvis signed a 3-picture deal at Paramount, and Loving You, a sanitized and somewhat fictionalized retelling of the birth of Elvis's own music career, was to be his first film. But prior to production beginning, Elvis was loaned to 20th Century Fox to appear in Love Me Tender.
He didn't star in that, though.
No. While it's certainly his first film, he is clearly in a supporting role there. Loving You was different in that it was a legitimate starring vehicle for Elvis, and this film was intended to showcase him, not just feature him.
And Elvis was very much up for it, celebrating his appearance in a color film by dyeing his hair black, a look he would keep up for the rest of his career.
This was inspired by Tony Curtis, whom he was a big fan of.
The script itself was based on a short story that had appeared in Good Housekeeping. Hal Wallace had bought the rights to the story especially for Elvis. Then, after witnessing the effect Elvis had on a live audience in person, as well as seeing the sort of manipulative nonsense that Tom Parker was capable of, both of these things became elements of the story, as it became perfectly tailored to tell the story of Elvis.
With a title song written by Lieber and Stoller, and guest appearances by Elvis's bandmates, and backup vocal group the Jordanaires, and Elvis's own parents, there's a lot of touches of authenticity. Elvis's band and the Jordanaires appeared in quite a few of his films, and his father did as well.
Not his mom?
Gladys Presley died in the years following this film, and that was heartbreaking for Elvis. So much so, in fact, that after she died, he never watched Loving You again.
Now, there's something interesting about how the film was released, right?
Yeah, they pioneered a release strategy that would become known as the Presley pattern, and that involved bypassing the big theaters and major city downtown cores, and instead putting the film directly into smaller local neighborhood film houses. This allowed for a wider release while cutting expenses and allowing more people to see the film. And the strategy worked, because the film was a hit.
But a hit with fans or with critics?
Well, fans. Elvis's films were almost universally loved by his fans, and not by critics. And many reviews dropped this movie firmly in the 2 out of 4 stars territory. Not good, not bad. In general, reviews praised the supporting cast and the music, while being critical of Elvis's performance.
I feel that's a bit unfair. And given how much anti-Elvis sentiment there was from the establishment back then, can those views even be trusted to be fair?
I'm not sure how much really objective reviewing of Elvis films goes on. Certainly not much these days. Elvis movies are their own genre, and that comes with a whole bunch of preconceived notions.
But Elvis is good in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, objectively good.
Yeah.
You hear about people saying he had this potential as an actor, and I feel like this is the movie where you see that.
He certainly had a presence. For me, Elvis, both as an actor and a singer, breaks into 2 sections. Before he went into the army and after. And I feel his best stuff, his most compelling stuff, the dangerous stuff, that came from before.
Yeah. You can't compare this film to junk like Double Trouble or Clam Bake.
Mm-mm.
You can tell he's not just going through the motions in this film.
Right? I would have loved to have seen more movies like Loving You and King Creole, and less movies like the ones you mentioned. But the body of work we got is what we got.
soundtrack album did well for this too, right?
Oh, sure it did. Technically, it was Elvis's third album. And while it's maybe not the strongest album top to bottom, the first 4 songs on side A are so good, it's a bit stunning. Mean Woman Blues, Teddy Bear, Loving You, and Got a Lot of Livin' to Do is a killer quartet of songs.
What's the tail of the tape on this one?
Wow, the IMDb gives it a 6.5, and Rotten Tomatoes audience score is 68%. There's no awards here, and this film is watchable on YouTube, which is good, because it has not been released on DVD, Blu-ray, or a streaming service. We open on the Paramount logo as a jazzy little number plays.
Ooh, it's in VistaVision. Classy.
Credits play over a card with a guitar and a big band swingy version of Loving You. Definitely not the ballad version most people would know.
We see a small town carnival. A country band is playing for a crowd. They're stumping for Jim Tallman, who wants to be the next governor. Scotty Moore is on guitar, Bill Black is on bass.
DJ Fontana's on drums, too.
Tex Warner is a washed-up country singer who didn't get any breaks and didn't make it big. He needs a gimmick, he's told by Glenda Markle, a publicist he seems very chummy with. Is there a history between them?
Okay, sidebar. Lizabeth Scott looks rough.
Yeah, like, what's with her face? That expression is so weird, and she won't stop making it.
Elvis shows up, delivering cases of beer to the party. He's grooving to the music, and Glenda grabs him to put on stage for some local interest. Hey, Tex, let's hear him sing, she says. Oh, and Elvis's name is Deke in this film.
And we get song 1, Whole Lot of Lovin' to Do. And he instantly wins the crowd. And Glenda is like, boing!
Elvis looks great, and seeing him perform in his prime with his band, it's amazing.
Tex says that if Deke played another number, the crowd would start throwing things at him. Yeah, they're door keys, Glenda replies. That's a good line.
Glenda is interested in Deke. She sees money in his music career. She offers him twice what he's making delivering beer to sing with Tex's band, but he turns it down. There's a serious James Dean vibe going to Elvis in this. He's all brooding and angsty.
Tex and Glenda sign a contract to go on the road. And Glenda got Deke fired, so he joins up with them. All according to plan. Tex doesn't want to perform with Deke, though, so he's a bit miffed when Glenda drives with Elvis. But, you know, Elvis is so pretty in this, I'd be driving with him. Fair play to Glenda.
In their first show in Longhorn, they pass Deke off as a local, and he gets brought up on stage to play with the band, just like they'd done at the Governor Carnival thing at the beginning.
And we get song 2, Let's Have a Party. The Wanda Jackson classic, but done really well by Elvis here.
And the local girls are like, wow, who is he?
Next night, they do the same trick in Claypool County, then Bakersville, then Jordan Crossing.
There's no bad songs here so far. This is all A-list Elvis rock. Deep into the tour, Tex gives Deke his own guitar and says he's a full part of the act now. And the whole gimmick about pulling him out of the crowd, that's over.
Elvis does the Lonesome Cowboy number. What is this? It doesn't fit the gimmick. But Glenda always notices the effect Deke has on the women in the audience.
This is no one's favorite Elvis song.
Sure isn't mine.
Glenda brings Deke a new shirt. She's concerned that Deke is spending too much time talking to Susan, who's the girl in the act. He says that when he talks to Glenda, it's all business. And she has a contract for him. Because, of course, she does.
Tex and Glenda ride together to the next town. They're both impressed with Deke and see lots of money in him. At one show, Glenda hires a pair of old biddies to go see Deke, and they hate him, which causes a riot as young girls freak out. It gets photographed. And that's good promo.
Rule 1 of promo. Always be promoting. And that leads them directly out of the small towns to their first big city gig in Amarillo. Tex is very excited. He could get back on records and TV. He thinks it's all due to Glenda. But she knows it's all due to Deke. She says it has to be split billing. Tex and Deke.
Deke gets a loud, awful cowboy outfit. And boots. He calls it special. Almost too special. They talk about Deke changing his name, and Deke freaks out on that one. More on that later.
In Amarillo, some teens recognize Deke in a restaurant, but one of them comes to pick a fight with him. He wants Deke to sing for his girl. Deke sings Mean Woman Blues with a jukebox accompaniment. Everyone goes nuts but the guy who asked for the song in the first place. So Deke beats him up.
Dinner and a show.
Next day at the theater, there's a huge crowd inside and out. Newspapers, agents, the whole deal.
But Daisy, the girl whose boyfriend Deke beat up, has snuck into his dressing room. She wants some hanky-panky and kissy-wissy, but he's having none of it. She calls him a phony.
But then Glenda and the photographers walk in just as Daisy is kissing Deke. Glenda is not happy about this, but she understands. Deke, for his part, feels like a monkey in a zoo.
The next plan is to go to Dallas, and to buy Deke a flashy car for publicity. The new agent wants to dump Susan and the backup musicians since they won't draw.
I feel like we don't know Susan that well.
Deke and Tex go to dinner. Tex finds out about Deke's contract with Glenda and is bummed by that.
The band is on a layoff, so Deke drives Susan home to her farm for a break. It's gorgeous and pastoral. Glenda hates this idea. But Tex knows that Deke has a crush on Glenda, so he convinced him to go with Susan.
At the farm, Deke is really happy and relaxed. He likes Susan and wants to be with her. He needs somebody. She tells him she was let go from the show.
He sings Loving You on his acoustic guitar for Susan's family. And Deke and Susan are getting closer. And then Glenda shows up in Deke's flashy new car, and she takes him away, splitting him from Susan. She says, "I'll always be here." And he says, "Well, see ya."
There's the romance right there.
Well, see ya.
How can a person who's got no home be homesick? Deke wonders as they drive through the night and he misses Susan.
He takes Glenda to a graveyard, and there is a lonely grave of a man named Deke Rivers. Okay, backstory. Elvis's character's real name is Jimmy Tompkins, and he had run away from an orphanage when he found this gravestone. He dropped the name Jimmy, and he became Deke, a man whose gravestone says he was loved by his friends. So he's been trying to deserve the name of Deke by having friends and having a good life. It's all a bit out of left field, but it's very sad.
In Freegate, a concerned group of biddies lobby the mayor to prevent Deke from playing. Ladies, 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 let's behave like gentlemen, the mayor says. Good line.
There's a lot of good little lines in this. Lizabeth Scott gets a lot of great quips in. On the night of the solo concert, the police have blocked off the Civic Hall and the show is shut down, and Glenda loves this. She wishes she had thought of it. Glenda sets up for a TV broadcast, while Deke decides he wants to go home. Or at least back to Susan. He's had it with showbiz.
If anyone wants me, I'll be in the bar rehearsing my drinking, Tex says. Deke is scared and disillusioned, but Glenda says she will help him.
Glenda goes and speaks to the mayor and town council and compares their attitude to rock and roll to the jazz concerns from 30 years earlier. She basically convinces them to let rock and roll have a hearing. Freegate could become an important town.
Small southern towns and trials, eh?
Who shall inherit the rock and roll?
Tex explains his past with Glenda, saying, "We were engaged once. It didn't work out. We got married." Tex and Deke have a heart-to-heart over Glenda. Deke feels he is special to her, and Tex feels alone and alienated from her.
Tex and Glenda speak. She tells him she tried to resurrect his career, but no one wanted him. So she's been using Deke to help Tex. That was her plan all along. But Tex is pretty sure she's been banging Deke.
And pissed off by all of the stress, Deke is driven off in his car.
The TV special on Freegate begins live on air. People talk about whether Deke should be allowed to play. This is pure generation gap stuff.
On the road, Deke has to swerve to avoid road cows. and Glenda finds him in his wrecked car. She tells him she's been doing her job. And yeah, everything is fake. The car, the fights, the publicity. But his talents and potential is real. She rips up the contract and tells him to get back to work.
Just as Susan is talking about Deke on TV, Deke shows up, and he sings Loving You, and Whole Lotta Lovin', and he tears the house down. A big contract awaits for big money and big shows.
Tex and Glenda are leaving, but Deke stops them and says he wants them all to stay together. They're his friends. And Tex and Glenda kiss, and Deke and Susan kiss, and ooh la la, the end.
That hit the spot. Just a nice and easy rock and roll origin story.
Let's pro and con this bad boy.
Okay, my pros. Number 1, Elvis. Elvis takes a lot of criticism, and rightly so, for his 60s movies and his generic repetitive performances in them. In his 50s movies, though, you see a different Elvis. One who is taking risks as a performer and trying to grow as an actor. Elvis is channeling his inner James Dean here, all brooding and filled with angst and doubt, and peppering his performance with little nuances, like a slight stutter and clear attachment issues, and dyeing his hair black for the color film. This was the first time he had done this, but a look he kept for the rest of his career. It shows the level of commitment that he was willing to take as an actor. Elvis is good in this movie, just as he's good in King Creole and good in Love Me Tender. He had a lot of potential as an actor, and this movie shows it. Number 2, the songs. Where Elvis's potential was already fully realized was as a singer, and we are treated to some really good musical numbers in this movie. What I love about the 50s era films are the music numbers where Elvis's actual band at the time, Bill Black, Scotty Moore, and DJ Fontana, are there playing behind him. Elvis had an incredible intensity and magnetism as a performer, and to have these numbers committed to film, with the king of rock and roll at the height of his powers, vocally, physically, and sexually, it's an incredible treat. Number 3, the script. The story here has just enough twists and turns to keep a standard tale of a discovered talent making it to the big time, and the graveyard Deke Rivers reveal is legitimately moving and emotional. But the real advantage of the script are the clever lines of dialogue that punctuate almost every scene. Every character is written well and given some really great lines, but especially Glenda and Tex. Some of their lines are just fantastic and made me smile when they'd say them. Actors love saying great lines, and you can tell that Lizabeth Scott in particular is having a blast with this character and her dialogue. If you only know Elvis movies from things like Double Trouble and Harem Scarum, you will find the writing in this film significantly ahead of your expectations. My cons. Number 1, Lizabeth Scott. As well written as the Glenda character is, I didn't feel Lizabeth Scott was great in this. Or at least I can't help but feel she could have been replaced with someone better. She's too much a film noir femme fatale for me to buy her as this character. So, yeah, great character, wrong actress. Number 2, the subplot about firing Susan and the trio. A big deal was made of this a few times in the script, but narratively it didn't add very much. In fact, it may have subtracted from things. Susan appearing on the TV show at the end defied logic since she had no real reason to be there, and the final musical numbers would have been much more powerful with Scotty, Bill, and DJ there. If the point was to create more stress and conflict for Deke, it didn't really work out that way. So why bother? And 3, the overcomplicated opening scene. I've praised the script for its cleverness, but it overdoes it with its southern fried political rally in service of the gubernatorial hopeful Tallman. A lot of time is spent setting this up and showing us all about it, and then it's done and none of it mattered. It never comes up again. It's just an overly elaborate setup that doesn't pay anything off later.
And is this a watch for you?
Elvis is always a watch for me, but I would comfortably place this in the very top few of his films. If you're a fan of his, definitely watch. But if you're not, but want to get an interesting tease of what he might have been capable of as an actor, then watch this. You're up.
Okay, so my pros. 1, the music. It's an Elvis movie. Of course the music was going to be great. But they definitely made some good choices with the song selection. The one song that Elvis did mostly in the dark on that stage was pretty weird, but in general, I really liked the songs they did. Just some good old-fashioned Elvis music that everyone can get into. 2. Deke and Susan. They were adorable. The one thing I didn't like about their relationship was how little of it we actually got to see. For most of the film, all we got was Deke talking about Susan in passing. I would have liked to see more of them actually together and building that relationship. However, what we did see was super cute. Their date at the fair was so sweet, and when they were together at Susan's farm, you could really see how much they liked each other. I just really liked them together. 3. Elvis. I could have easily made him all 3 of my pros. What I really liked about him in this film was that he wasn't just being Elvis in a movie. He was actually acting and being that character. And honestly, he was great. He did this little stutter that was just so endearing, and the scene where he explains his backstory and the name Deke, oh my god, he was so emotional and vulnerable in it. He was really powerful in that scene. I wanted to see more of Elvis doing this sort of thing in films. Now my cons. 1. Lizabeth Scott. I preferred her in Too Late for Tears. She was so good in that. What the heck happened? For starters, she looked rough. It did not look like it was only 10 years after Too Late for Tears. And her performance just wasn't enjoyable to watch. She always had the same look, sort of a grimace, smirk thing on her face, even when she was crying. And she did something with her line delivery that made her sound disingenuous all the time. Her character was so cool and interesting. I really would have liked to see someone else in the role. 2. How repetitive some of the scenes were. Not that they were bad scenes or anything, but how many times do we really need to see the band all driving off to a different city and performing the same songs on stage? Because it got to be a bit much after the 3rd time. I think they would have been better off to cut out most of those scenes. Keeping one is fine, but there's already that montage that clearly indicates that they're touring different cities, so I think we would have gotten the point. 3. How quickly Deke forgives Glenda. She was just such a conniving, manipulative snake. Seriously, when she apologized, both to Tex and Deke, I didn't believe her one bit. Sure, she was crying, but it still didn't sound very sincere. It would have been one thing for Deke to go back to the TV special for his own sake, but it's a whole other thing when he says he still wants Glenda's help with his career. He just totally forgave her for getting him fired, starting rumors, and just being generally manipulative within an hour. I'm sorry, but if I was him, I would have hightailed it out of there with Susan and never looked back.
And what do you say overall? Is this a watch or a don't watch?
Well, duh. Watch.
Okay. And that is episode 28 in the books. Well, that is episode 28 in the books.
What did you think of this show or the movie? Have you seen it? Are you a big Elvis fan and you want everyone to know? Leave us a message and tell us all about it.
And be sure to check in next week for the last romance movie of our February dedicated to all things lovey-dovey,
hanky-panky,
and kissy-wissy.
We're looking at a silent film next week, right?
Oh, we are. Check our social media for teasers on that. And while you're waiting for the next episode, please mention our show to everyone you can.
You don't have to keep us all to yourself. We're not a secret.
So tell your friends.
Tell your enemies.
You never know. They might like watching Elvis zoom around in convertibles as much as you do.
Maybe even more. For Derek the Dad Kick, I'm Sam, and I love old movies.
Additional research for I Love Old Movies, the podcast, is done by Nikki Weatherden. Audio clips come from freefx.co.uk. Images are used through the provisions of fair use, and our theme song, Burning Bridges, is by The Crocs.